And now it's Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. I have a wonderful guest today, Catherine Shainberg, author of the Kabbalah of Light, Ancient Practices to Ignite the Imagination and Illuminate the Soul. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm delighted. Thank you.
You know, you're an author, but you're an awful lot more as well. As we know, you're a teacher. You're a dreamer. You are, we all are, but you dream in a way that you're going to be teaching us about our dreams, right? You're a healer, you're a visionary, and you're, to me, a real intuitive. So I'm really honored to have you on our show. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm a dreamer first, I would say, and then I feel very much that I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
It's very important for me to communicate to people the power of the tools that the imagination brings to us.
First, why don't we go through a little bit about Kabbalah for folks who don't know? Yeah. What is Kabbalah? What does it mean? And then we're going to get into the book and why you wrote it.
Yeah. Well, the first thing to know, of course, is that Kabbalah is the mystical path of the Jewish people. Like Christianity has a mystical path, so do the Muslims. Sufis are the mystics of the Muslim path, right? Mm-hmm. So Kabbalah is the mystical path of Judaism. Now, there are many different kinds of Kabbalah, and one of the complications is that people have thought that Kabbalah is very complicated. That's why we have the word Kabbal. It's a Kabbal. But in fact, the original Kabbalah is extremely simple, and it has to do with inner gazing, looking inward. So basically, the word Kabbalah means to receive. So I'm receiving what I'm looking in, and the subconscious responds with images, or in images, or in a voice, or in an experience. And that is the act of receiving.
How do we look inward and how do we receive? I mean, it's something that very often we do if we're sitting on a beach and we're reflecting, right? But throughout our daily lives, which really tend to be busy, too hectic, and as honestly, as much as we all try and get away from that, it's tough. So how do we do it? How do we practice looking inward and receiving?
Well, I think to make it easy for everybody to understand, you're doing it at night. So you go to bed, you're relaxed, you close your eyes, you go to sleep, and one would think that everything would be dark. But suddenly we have light, we have technicolor, and we have stories, forms that appear, right? So this is something we know how to do. We all know how to do it. Unfortunately, people have not taken it as seriously as it deserves, because it's a very, very powerful way to connect with one's own inner strength. So in the dream time at night, it's easy. In the daytime, there's a little practice for many people. Other people are actually born as visionaries. So wherever they go, you're talking to me, and suddenly I have an image. Let's say we're talking together and I look at you and I have a feeling for you and an image pops up. And so my subconscious is answering the question, who is Deborah? And I see this beautiful flower. And so it's answering me, right?
Yeah.
It could also happen that I'm in a meeting, in a business meeting, and they're talking numbers and all the rest, and I see a black diagonal. And the black diagonal is saying, don't go in this direction. This is not working. So in other words, will find a response to the everyday world if we learn to simply just throw it in. Okay, I'm sitting there with all of you, and I have this question, okay? And then it'll instantly respond.
Is it our intuition, Catherine, essentially? Is that what this is?
Well, we could say that, but the intuition has a slightly different connotation. It means that I'm sitting with you and suddenly have the intuition that we're sitting in this hotel. And I say to you, Deborah, have you been to this hotel? And you say, oh, yes, I was there yesterday with my husband.
Hmm.
So somehow the intuition is catching the images and the messages in what I call the dream field of a person.
That's interesting. I have to tell you, that sort of thing happens to me all the time. I will be sitting there speaking to someone, thinking about and talking about friend of mine, for example, in Florence, that I haven't spoken to in a while. This is so weird. And then all of a sudden the phone rings and there she is. And I think, wow, this does not happen to me just once or twice. It happens a lot. So is that intuition? Am I picking something up? Do you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
it's like a telephone, but it's a dream
Mm.
telephone. And it
Oh.
can be very, very developed. It doesn't just, a lot of people have had the experience of thinking of somebody and the phone rings,
Mm.
but it could be much, much more complex. Um, I could be imagining that my friend is floating above the Manhattan Bridge and she can't breathe, right? This happened to me once. That's why I give the other example. And because I know where I'm at, I call the husband who says, she's in surgery just now. She broke her nose.
Wow.
Just next, and the hospital was just next to the Manhattan Bridge or wherever in New York. I can't remember the details, but it was exact.
Wow, that is something, I have to tell you. Now, what's interesting is a lot of people think of Kabbalah as simply something that Jewish people study and practice.
No.
That's not the case, and it certainly isn't the case with you. Could you tell us a little bit about you growing up? What were you like as a kid, and how did you get into this?
Well, first, anybody can do this work. I've just come out of a workshop with 65 Chinese people, and they're doing the work, and they're
Mm,
certainly not Jewish. So
right.
inner gazing is open to everybody. The only reason why I talk Kabbalah is because I come from that tradition. I'm immersed in that tradition. So it informs my work, right?
Mm,
But as a tiny child, I was doing this work. Always
mm,
3, 4 years old, I can remember doing this work, right? Um, Talking to angelic beings all the time, protecting the house, protecting there was an old lady who lived across the street. She was homeless. She lived in there was an empty parking lot. And every night I would wave at her and I would surround her with blue light, a blue blanket, so she would be comfortable, right? And I was doing that when I was 4. So
hmm.
I continued working without knowing what I was doing, but always with images. King George, I was at King George's funeral. So Queen Elizabeth's funeral really rang a bell because I was there as a 5-year-old standing there at his cortege. And to me, it
Wow.
was absolutely natural to go to the coffin, open it up, take his hand, and take him up to heaven. And so I was doing something that I found out many, many years later, we do in the lineage, which is called an ascension prayer for somebody who's just died.
Hmm.
And why this came to me is a very long story, but I was working with images all my childhood. When I went to college, I went to study images because I didn't know anything else that was really as interesting to me, right? And I
Right,
was
right.
struck by the fact that you could look at a Matisse painting and take away the lemon and the painting fell apart. So if I
Hmm.
took away the lemon, I felt sad. If I put the lemon back in, I felt exalted. So
Hmm.
that told me that I could move images to help people to feel better. And that was a very strong key to me. And so I did all my art history at the French Sorbonne in Paris, at the School of the Louvre Museum. And, uh, and then I got into trouble because my PhD professor would not allow me to really study how images move people. So we had a big fight, and that put me outside of the pole, if you want, of art history, and I had to find a new way. And so I started my dream journey in a way to get to where I'm getting now. And so, shall I tell you that story?
I love the story. We've spoken about it. So yeah, briefly, because I'd really like my audience to know this story. I think it's beautiful. Please.
So, but I decided to go to an American university, and indeed I got a full scholarship to Harvard. But I kept on hearing, you got to go to the Middle East. So, because I always listened to my inner voice, my subconscious, I went to the Middle East. I went all over the Middle East, and I still didn't understand what I was doing. And then the voice said, you got to go to Israel. And I didn't know why I was going to Israel, because I wasn't particularly interested. But it was so loud, so strong, that I went to Israel instead of going to Harvard. And I found myself in a kibbutz picking fruit, not knowing what I was doing. And there was the Yom Kippur War. And after the Yom Kippur War, I met some French people. I'm French, so I met some French people. And I asked how the French society was in Jerusalem. And they said, well, it's really congregates around a very well-known lady called Colette. And my whole being, my head exploded into light. And I knew I had to meet this lady. And they never told me she was a teacher. But it was so strong that I realized, well, that's why I've been dreaming that I had to come to Israel. Then I had to go to the kibbutz. Then I had to go to Jerusalem. I moved to Jerusalem. And it took me a while to get the man to dare to take me to this lady whom he considered very distinguished and frightening, so he didn't want me to. So anyway, I arrived finally in her garden and in this little beautiful street in Jerusalem, and there's a blue gate, and we went down into the garden. She was sitting there on a very regal lady, and she looked at me and she said, "What do you want?" Which was terrifying. And I still didn't know who she was, right? So, but completely out of the blue, I said, I want you to teach me how images move people.
Wow.
And she said to me, I've waited for you a long time. And that was the beginning of my apprenticeship, where I found out she was a world-renowned teacher. People came from all over the world to see her. And she was considered one of the two great women Kabbalists in Israel. She was so well known that the postman once brought a letter that said, Colette, Jerusalem.
Wow. It's like, wow, that's pretty incredible. But isn't there also a connection between Colette and your mom or your grandma, something like that?
Yeah. Yes, yes.
Please, just tell us briefly, and then we're going to get into a little more in the book. Because I find this connection fascinating. And for folks who believe this sort of thing, these sort of connections, I find it very powerful. I do.
Well, this was particularly striking because after about 2 years of studying there, I had never said anything except that I was studying with a woman called Colette. And I was still not knowing that, what I was doing was Kabbalah. But my aunt came to visit. And so I said, please come and meet my teacher. So we come into the house, and Colette's sitting there, and she gets up and she goes, and she embraces her, which was absolutely shocking, right? I didn't understand what was happening. And it turned out that my mother, my whole maternal family, lived across the street from Colette in Oran, which is one of the great towns in Algeria, and had gone to the same school.
I mean, come on. What are the chances, Catherine? What are the chances of this? So slim, but it led you here, right? You were led here. Just incredible. Wow.
Well,
Wow. So
there's more to it, but maybe I'll say it as we go along because it turns out it's so utterly out amazing that at some point I'll tell you. Yeah, it is. It's
yeah,
like really finding a needle in the haystack.
it's beautiful, is what it is, and it probably really cemented for you. Um, I'm in the right place, right?
I would knew I was in the right place. I
Hmm.
mean, I
I,
had absolutely no doubt. The other thing that was really fascinating was that I wasn't interested in Judaism. I wasn't even Jewish,
yeah.
let alone Kabbalah. I'd never studied it, but I was doing all these visions, which we called the waking dreams, with her. I was with her every day for 10 years, sitting
Hmm.
with her, sitting next to her, listening to her, working with people, um, doing the work myself. I was there at 7 o'clock in the morning with all my dreams written and painted. And that was it was an absolutely rigorous work, right? And so I didn't know what I was doing, and she never talked to me about Judaism
Hmm.
until one day there was a very, very strong image where all the saints were gathered, and they wrote in the middle of the sky, Judaism. So she said, take a look at Judaism. That was about 2 years later, right?
I'm
And
getting a little off top. I'm getting a little off topic, but I'm going to ask anyway. Since you're
uh,
able to see
uh,
such things, where do you believe we go after here? Is it our souls that just go somewhere else? Look, it's confusing to so many, but since you seem to have such a very strong belief and faith and knowledge, what do you think, or
I
what do you
think
believe?
I think we have a huge dream field. And
Hmm.
that when we come into this world, that dream field coalesces into a body.
Hmm.
And so um, many people get into the body and then they feel um, they lose contact with this vast field that they are part of. And it's a vast dream informational field. Now, I
Hmm.
think when we die, we dissolve the body and return into this vast field. And so there we meet others, not in the body, but we meet them in the energetic patterns, in the energetic flow. So
Interesting.
I believe we continue to do this, right?
Yeah.
And here,
Let's
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to segue a little bit into unless you want to finish that thought, please. I did not mean to interrupt you. I thought you had finished, but I did want to talk about the subconscious, creating the dialogue between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Perhaps, I mean, this is all related and also with what we were just talking about.
Yes. Well, in about 400 years ago, in our especially in the European history, the imagination and a lot of superstitions were rampant. And so there was a movement away from that towards facts, science, observation, and so forth. And then we ran with that. And we have become extremely developed in the scientific realm, right? But we have
Right.
abandoned the other. Now, for me, you have two brains, and you have your conscious brain, which sits high above and is logical, causal, analytical, and we need that. That's how we live in the everyday world. The subconscious brain is maybe more in the heart. We don't know where it's located, but the way it works is that the subconscious is all of the sensory experiences that you've had all your life, that your family has had, that's gathered within you, right? It's like a
Right.
great river of experiences. And so the conscious mind needs to turn its eyes back to look at the subconscious. Now, let's say, again, you have a question. You've done all your due diligence about that question. Then turn the conscious mind into the subconscious and say, my question is, should I hire this person?
Right.
The subconscious acts it's like a magnet. The question pulls up the forms that want to inform me about what I should or shouldn't.
How do you teach this though? Because so many are really not connected to that at all. They just go about their lives. They get in the car, there's traffic, they're angry. Like they're so far from even tapping into this subconscious mind that they barely even tap into the conscious of what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? So how do we get
But
there?
this, I believe that everybody knows how to do it.
Really?
Because
Okay.
yeah, but because we're so addicted, we're an addictive society. We're so addictive that we're not listening. But the inside is saying, "Don't take that road. Leave your wife. Do this. Don't sell this stock." It's constantly talking to us.
Right. We just have to, we have to listen. We have to look for it, listen, right?
Exactly.
We just, yeah, we have to realize that the decisions we're making
Now
are in fact, go ahead, please.
we are actually catatonic most of the time, but we are already connected to that inner voice and that inner field, which is the subconscious field. Talks to
Now
us
in
in
your
voices, in experiences, in images, right? In smells.
in your book, you also have, I believe, what is it, 160 different exercises. I do love a book that does this because for those of us like myself who sometimes can be a little thick-headed, we need the exercises to say, no, this is what I'm trying to explain, because the exercises will get us there. Here's an interesting one to me. And I often notice, oh, this is one, that with each exercise, pretty much, you start with close your eyes, right?
Right.
Where does that bring us when we close our eyes?
Well, I always like to remind people of the Bible, and the second sentence of the Bible is God hovers over the dark waters.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to do. We need to look back. We hover over the dark waters of our body. And the first thing that appears is light. And then the
Yeah.
second thing that appears is order.
Hmm.
And so that's why I'm saying it's absolutely natural for us to be doing that, right? I
Yeah.
ask the question and light appears, and then an order appears that is showing me where best to go and what best to do. It's an amazing fact that we have that inner voice and that
Yeah, but
inner capacity to see clearly what needs to be done.
now some of your exercises include dreams. You talk about family tapestry. You talk about, wait, hang on, I'm just losing my place from my notes, so just one moment, sorry about that. Clearing ancestral trauma.
Right.
You talk about surrendering. You talk about a waking dream. You also talk about family tapestries, like a family tapestry. Leave what you don't know and let go. How do you teach them? I mean, they're all different. Let's face it. You've got 160 different exercises, different disciplines to discuss. But how do you start? Let's say I come to you as a student, because I know you teach. How do you start this process of getting a student into the mindset of the exercises, of connecting the conscious and subconscious and being conscious about what they're doing? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, they're going to tell me their problem because people come because they have a problem. And for me, they tell me a story. I'll ask them a few little questions about the story. And then the story to me has become clarified. And then I look a little below and I see, oh, there's a pattern here.
Right.
Every time they lose the boyfriend because they don't believe they're worthwhile. Then they lose the job because they're not worthwhile. And then so we go back, and could you close your eyes and go back to the very, very first time you felt worthless? How old are you? Where are you? Who's there? And that'll get them. It's instantaneous. They will be able to say, I'm 4 years old, my dad has just told me I'm an idiot and has slapped me. Okay, so then we start clearing that up, because this is a trauma. And one of the issues about the traumas is they block our freedom, and they block our subconscious flow, the imagination that flows. We see it when we're children. Children are always playing with their imagination. Well, not anymore. They're sitting in front of their iPads, which is a disaster. But because they're not playing anymore, they're not growing themselves anymore. But we need to be flowing. So I'll start like that.
Yeah.
What do you want to ask me? And somebody will want to ask something specific, right? I've tried passing my accountant's exams 9 times and I failed. Okay?
Right.
So that's the would be the question. So close your eyes. Let's look at the grade you're going to get this time. It's done in dreaming. The guy sees the grade and he passes the exam.
And when you say it's done in dreaming, you show us, right, how to tap into those dreams, and not necessarily the ones that we're doing at night when we're in such deep REM sleep, right? You're showing us how to tap into them while we're in the conscious, correct?
Right. I mean, you're dreaming all the time, because dreaming is experience. It's about experiencing. I'm experiencing you as you talk, and the noise outside in the street in New York. I'm experiencing the light around me. I'm always in experience.
Yeah.
So I'm always dreaming, and people don't realize that. They're dreaming all the time. It's not just REM. REM simply is more vivid, if you want. We're closer, maybe subconscious than the conscious. Because without the conscious mind, you can't dream. Because the conscious mind is bringing order into the chaos of all these experiences.
I have to tell you, you mentioned before about, we've gotten to a point where we study technology and science, which is terrific. But back in the day, and I mean way back in the day, it used to be philosophy and those types of areas of study. And you're right, we've gotten so far away from that. And that's really critical, even if you're studying sciences and whatnot. I often say that doctors, when they go to med school, it'd be great to take a philosophy course so they can understand what they're prescribing and understand how to better connect with a patient. So I think that's very important that you mentioned that we've gotten so far away from the philosophy of life. And I think that's been a real detriment to society. Don't you think so?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I was at the doctor the other day, and I was complaining about something, and he said, "Oh, well, but that's your neck." I said, "But my neck's connected to my spine. I have a problem in the spine. It's connected to my spine." He said, "Well, I'm not dealing with that. I'm only dealing with your lower spine." And that's an attitude that is completely foreign to the dreamer, because the dreamer understands that all of these layers, let's say my physical body, if I look into it, it begins to expand. It's vast. It's just, and then I can telephone my best friend in the dream time, and they'll call me in a few minutes, right? It's vast, and it becomes an energetic pattern. And we are energy. And so I can go into the energetic pattern and see that I have a problem in the spine and start correcting it energetically. So I am now working with different bodies, my physical body, my emotional, my mental, my spirit. I work with all of them, right?
Yeah. Well, what would you like to tell our audience? Because it's a lot to get into this book, right? The Kabbalah of Light, so that they're interested in picking up this book or in, telephoning you, emailing or whatever, because they want to learn more. What would you like to tell them? How will this pertain to their everyday life as they're driving in traffic and getting to where they have to go?
Well, they'll be able to go faster, or it'll be more fun. because because they'll be entertaining themselves all the time, right? Which is worthwhile. And also, again, I can ask a question. I am cogitating. What am I going to write in my dissertation?
Yeah.
And I've studied again all of the things that I need to look at, and I've, in a way, thrown that question into my dreaming. What am I going to, which aspect of this? And suddenly it's like a creative fountain. It comes up and says, well, you're going to be writing about this and this.
Right. In other words, you're saying it helps us to uncover what it is that we're trying to do, where our unstuckness. You actually refer to the word being stuck as stuckness, to unstuck yourself, right? So essentially, this really helps you to, whatever is holding you back, this helps you open that up to understand that so that you can go forward, correct?
Right. Because you have to think of, you've got your conscious mind, and then you have an intermediate place, which is the surface of the ocean. And like our oceans today, there's garbage on the surface of the ocean, and there are blocked areas, where the waters don't flow, right? We need to clear that up. The moment you clear that up, you see below the surface to what some would call the soul or the superconscious, right? We see a clear creative flow. It's constantly flowing. So the first thing that happens in all work is clearing up the blocked aspects. And then it becomes a practice. And there's an very easy way of doing it. I don't need to speak about my mother, whom I had a difficult relationship with for 25 years. I don't need to talk about it for 25 years. I can actually look at it. It looks like a piece of rotten meat, let's say. How am I going to repair that? Well, maybe I'll put it in the ground and let it decompose and water it and put seeds, and something new is going to grow. And now I have a different relationship to the mother because I have repaired it. And I've seen an image that I can relate to when I think of my mother that's not going to be as painful. So we start working with the subconscious, if you want, right?
That's actually a beautiful image because, again, so many people are stuck, and often they have no idea why they're stuck. And I think if you're trying to go about, I'm stuck in certain areas, and I often try and figure out why I'm stuck. But it's about taking a pause and studying. And this book in particular allows us to do that. So I don't know, I just think this is a terrific book. I read it bits and pieces, and then I reread it over the weekend, and it really helped me a lot. It's a lot to read. I have to tell you, it's a lot to read. It's not a quick read. It's something you put down and you come back to. I tend to thumb through a book, right? I look at little chapters that might have significance to me at the moment. But I really want to tell my listeners that anyone who's interested in learning more about how to, get this conscious and the subconscious, what does that mean? If they've heard of Kabbalah, if they're interested in what that means, but also if they're stuck, I think this is an exceptional book. Also, if they want to study with you, how can they do that, Catherine? How can they get in touch with you?
The School of Images is the center in New York City, right? It's international because we have schools across the world, but that's where you contact the school, theschoolofimages.org. And you can call, and there are beginning classes and more advanced classes and workshops. And so there are ways to interact with the school.
You also do Zoom school? Do you have that as well? You must.
Everything is Zoom these days.
Yeah.
It's sad, but it's also very useful.
It's sad, but it's useful because even though I was in New York last week, right? And we maybe could have done this together in person. How useful to have Zoom that we can connect this way. And for me now, Zoom it's the screen isn't even there, because I really feel the connection as I'm talking to you, because it's what I'm thinking, really.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Is there anything you want to tell our audience before I let you go?
Well, we have lost contact with this, and
Yes.
it is the source of our creativity. Today, we have a world that is falling apart, and we're all suffering from it. We're all extremely anxious. But in fact, this is one of the very powerful ways in which you can make corrections, both in your inner life, in your consciousness, and then in the outer world. So, and it's very quick, it's very simple. Anybody can do it. Children do it all the time. So what do I do if the bridge has fallen down? Well, I'm going to take a plane. And they take a plane and they invent all the time. This is your creative source. And so the more we develop that creativity, the more we're going to find inventive and good ways of transforming the world. As first ourselves, but then the world. Right? So I think it's very important to do it at this point in the world.
It's not just important, it's critical, Catherine. We really are at a critical point. And maybe we always were, right? Centuries ago, but we didn't know what other people were doing. Now that we're connected 24/7, be it news or whatever else on media, social media, we see what's happening in the world. And this is critical in order to, help our inner selves, our own anxieties, because I know I have plenty of them, because I will absorb it, and that's not necessarily healthy, right? This helps us, your book and your teachings help us to find a place for all that, right?
Well, there's a very simple exercise for anxiety that we teach everybody, and the student, the children too, which is to literally breathe out the anxiety. And so you breathe it out. You can close your eyes and breathe it out as a dark smoke, and see that smoke becoming a little cloud in the sky. You continue to breathe and breathe until your breath becomes clear and the little cloud in the sky gets a bit bigger. And then close your eyes, breathe out strongly, break the cloud into thousands of pieces. Breathe out a second time and see the pieces dissolving. And breathe out a third time and the sky is blue. And this, if you do it, is extraordinarily simple, and it works, right? So all
every time,
every time, and the children, it's incredible. They love it, and so you'll see that when we work with the images, that we're not talking mental. We're not giving them, this is what you have to do. They can see the blue sky. Now the sky is clear. Well, that's an experience. And experience is what heals us, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and practice, as you like to say in the book, practicing this, right? You can't just be anxious once, do the exercise, and it disappears. This is something we have to practice. We have to stay with it, because this is then how it becomes habit, right? For lack of a better word.
Well, no, but it is a good word, because we have to choose. And people think, well, but I'm miserable. But that's a choice, basically. If we have the tools to be able to choose something better for ourselves, then we need to really take that step. So you can't be neutral in the world. You've got to choose for the good. Choose for the good of yourself, your family, and the world.
Yeah. Well, Catherine, thank you very much for joining us. You've been lovely. And I may be calling over to you myself, because there's some of the, I'd like to actually study a little bit of what you're teaching. I think that would be wonderful. So you've had a real impression on me, as has this book. Catherine Shainberg, The Kabbalah of Light, Ancient Practices to Ignite the Imagination and Illuminate the Soul. I like to say, illuminate your soul, our soul. So thank you very much, Catherine, for joining us.
Thank you so much for
I
having me.
appreciate it. And it's quite interesting how the sirens were going as we were talking, and we've maintained our calm. So we were tested. So thank you very much, Catherine. And please, everybody, look up Catherine Shainberg and also her school. They do Zoom, they do everything, and they are around the globe. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.